Hello and welcome to another edition of Fragments of Rock with me, John Holmes, and my son Mark. This all came about because of that record collection behind me. Mark said to me, "It's an amazing collection, we could just talk about it." That was a good idea. It still is a good idea. But then you wanted to take it one stage further, didn't you, Mark?
Yeah, in your garage of all places, that you've got all these tapes of previous interviews, and some of them are for amazing artists and kind of allied kind of guests, I suppose. And I really want to know some of the background kind of stories behind those, like Marc Bolan really going around a horse around the country. Is that true?
It's always captured your imagination. Understand why? Because he actually said to me he wanted to be a traveling troubadour, traveling the world, traveling the country on a horse and performing that way. Figment of his imagination. It's now possible. That's a strange thing. But the thing was, you asked me to find the recording. I couldn't find it, and then suddenly I unearthed it. It was on a big one of these nab spools behind me, and he does talk about going around the countryside on a horse.
There is no security in this civilization. All the things like bread and fame, it doesn't mean anything. It's part of something you acquire, but the downfalls that it brings with are so huge that, in fact, they're not really worth it. They're enjoyable at the beginning, but and perhaps one would miss them. But basically, my ideal thing would be to just travel about a country and just play and do free festivals. I don't mean this country, man. I don't want to do free festivals in a country full of capitalists and sort of nasties. I'm not pointing fingers, it's just the way it's grown over the years, And I just like to have a horse and ride with a guitar, be it solar power guitar, so I don't need an amp, plug it into my eardrum or something, and just play for people all the time for nothing, and be fed for it and given a bed for the night, and stay as long as I was welcome, and then go somewhere else. If there was a land I could do that, I'd much rather do that than do what I'm doing now. But for me, this is the only way that I can allow that vision in my head to work.
When was this? Because I was born in 1970. I clearly recall the story and being fascinated by it throughout my life. So when was this?
Yeah, you wouldn't have known it the first time around because this was 1971. What had happened was Tyrannosaurus Rex had changed their name to T-Rex. Now, I was aware of them in the old folk rock circuit, the mid-60s. And suddenly the name was changed. Now, the apocryphal story is that Tony Visconti, who was the producer, he got fed up with writing Tyrannosaurus, so he just wrote T and then Rex. Marc Bolan didn't like that at first, but then grew accustomed to the idea. This coincided with the fact that Marc wanted to turn it into more of a rock band than a folk band with Mickey Finn. And Ride a White Swan came out. So when I interviewed him, Ride a White Swan had just been an enormous hit.
Yeah, I want people to see pictures. It was sparked off from the idea of, I don't like jet planes particularly, and I just like the idea of riding a creature, be it a flamingo or a giant eagle or something. And swans just seem very, very funky things. Visually it was a nice thing. And I thought about that. And the people in the story, in fact, there are people called Swan Kings who ride giant swans. And that's, in fact, it's from that, the references. That Beltane was a planet, it took place. It's all sort of from that, really. So, in fact, it's all terribly literal, the song.
And the interesting thing about that is that I remember when Bob Dylan changed his music in 1965. I was there at the Royal Albert Hall, and there were boos and hisses because suddenly this hippie type band, or a hippie type person, had changed, and this was a hippie type band that had changed. And I asked him, about the reaction, and this is what he had to say.
You changed your name sort of slightly to T-Rex now, and you're in the charts. How much difference has the charts been made? Now you're a pop star.
Well, no, I don't think I'm a pop star. I think we're musicians reaching more people now, which is exactly what the beginning, we decided this was going to be the year that we were either going to not do it anymore or reach the most people possible. And I had the feeling that it would be nice, we only have 60 years or something, man. I want to experience it all. It's not that I was really bored with what we did before, it's just we grew naturally into it, We still do a lot of the old numbers, we're still quite acoustic, but there's, we wanted to make the live thing more exciting.
Have you noticed any difference in the audience reaction? There's a lot of people get worried when they're in the charts because they're going to lose a lot of so-called fans.
If anyone really, after 4 years of listening to our music, or 3 years, and seeing us live, and hopefully reading and knowing that I'm not a fool, I hope they wouldn't want to listen to us. But if that was the case, goodbye. You know, wouldn't affect me because that's silly.
So, I mean, I'm in kind of awe that you've met the great man. So where did it happen?
This is quite an important interview, really, because it happened at the cusp of him changing. But he happened to turn up at Nottingham University, and before, when he'd been Tyrannosaurus Rex, I hadn't been that much interested. But now I was doing a rock show, and he was definitely, in my mind, rock. So I had to go along and interview him. And the interesting thing was, when he was a sort of hippie band, it was just people, the John Peel type listeners were listening to it, progressive rock listeners were listening to it. When he changed to Tyrannosaurus Rex and brought out Ride a White Swan, he got a whole new audience. And as a result, I took along my youngest sister-in-law, who's only about 16, I think, at the time. And she came because she was in awe of this Marc Bolan. We went into this big room, and Kate was with me as well, my wife. We went into this big room, which was where they were all sort of setting up. And it was a lovely, relaxed atmosphere. I think they'd just come off stage, and they were just sort of packing up. And it was the only time, this wasn't Mark, it was one member of his band, the only time we've ever been offered drugs. I think they were smoking cannabis. And this chap said to me, "Do you want a roll off?" I said, "No, thank you," because I don't smoke, of course. I've been coughing all the way through. Jill remembers it differently because Jill still has the autograph. She asked Marc Bolan to sign it. She's still got the autograph. I think that's worth a bit of money as well. I shouldn't be avaricious like this, but I think it must be worth a bit of money because it was really in the early days, and Hot Love hadn't come out.
Just so I can picture it, because I like to sort of reimagine things. What building was it in Nottingham University of Nottingham? Sorry.
All the bands appeared in the Portland building, and there was a ballroom, and there was a restaurant next door. They were appearing in the ballroom.
So that's the big building out in front of the lake.
Right at the top, yeah, right at the top of the lake, and right at the top of the building, the Portland building. You used to have to go up all the stairs to get there. Great venue. What
was he like as a person off mic as well?
He's actually charming. You really get what I found was he was a very soft-spoken, affable bloke, as you hear in that interview. In fact, and the next thing I asked him about was, what about his new record, and he talked about Hot Love, and this was, well, it was important to him.
I'm very pleased with it. I was very pleased with the reaction it's had so far. I think it's the most important thing I've ever done.
This record?
It's the only record I've ever been totally pleased with as a finished production. Because I did all my head on it. I didn't hold anything back, There's some lovely people, a couple of the mothers, called Howard and Mark, sing on it, and they're such good singers. Best singers in the world. And that pleases me. It was a good session. It was such an up to do,
What about LPs?
We haven't, in fact, the 3 tracks on the single, all we've recorded, we haven't had time to record anything else. Which again for me is very new, because even when White Swan come out I was recording new material, So it's like very interesting for me, because whatever we do next won't sound like Hot Love, you see. Because that was a sound for me, a very definite repeat echo, Elvis Presley echo sound. It was like a whole concept in my head. But the next things won't be like that.
Hot Love. Well, a star was born.
Was he a big star then?
Good question. The reason I went to the University of Nottingham was I knew he was going to become a star. You had that feeling about him. There was a buzz. And the fact that he was now, my youngest sister-in-law wanted to come along and see him meant something was happening. It was only later on when they put a little bit of glitter under his eyes and he appeared on Top of the Pops that somebody said, glam rock. So he's reckoned to be the father of glam rock. But I never saw that happening. All I saw was this really nice bloke who was making interesting music, and I thought he'd do really well. I didn't think he was going to be sort of acclaimed as the next Beatles, but that's how it happened. It was just amazing. And I was so privileged to meet him on that day.
And was it right that he's met John Peel at some stage? As in that, did that help sort of like get his career, career on?
Yeah, John Peel launched his career really. Although I put it to him, how did you get in with the BBC? And this was his answer.
How did you get on with the BBC? How did you actually get in on that?
Well, I never was, actually. I didn't have anything to do with the BBC. I mean, I met John through a friend when he just came off Radio London. And he was broke, had nowhere to go. And Middle Earth had just opened, which was a club, the first supposedly underground club. And we played there for nothing for a couple of days. and eventually they gave him a job as a disc jockey there. And it just sort of grew in a slow progression from John got the radio show till he, we did it along with Fairport Convention and family who were unknown at the time, And slowly but surely the gigs came in, and then we made some records, and here we are.
We'll have more stories about Fragments of Rock if you tune in another occasion. See you then.